Hello, I'm continuing and concluding my reviews on the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise with the 2010 Nightmare on Elm Street remake. And I'm joined by my friend Jeremy, who technically has appeared in all my Nightmare on Elm Street reviews leading up to this, because I used audio from the retrospective that we did back in 2018. Now, this was directed by Samuel Bayer, who prior to this was primarily known as a music video director. He actually directed the music video for Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit, which is actually one of the most legendary music videos of all time. Now, the movie was actually co-written by Wesley Strick, who prior to this wrote movies like Joseph Rubin's True Believer, Arachnophobia, Martin Scorsese's remake of Cape Fear, Wolf, and Doom. The movie was also co-written by Eric Heisserer, or Heisserer, I'm not really sure how to pronounce his last name. Now, he would go on to write movies like Final Destination 5, the 2011 prequel to John Carpenter's The Thing, Lights Out, Arrival, which he actually was nominated for an Academy Award for, and Bird Box. And the movie was produced by Michael Bay and was done by Michael Bay's production company, Platinum Dunes, and is part of a series of horror remakes that they did in the 2000s. This also includes the 2003 remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and its prequel, the Hitcher remake, and the 2009 Friday the 13th reboot. So yeah, what do you think of the Nightmare on Elm Street remake?
Well, I think it had a lot of potential. They had some good elements in it, but I just think the execution, for the most part, wasn't all that great. They had a great cast. They had, an Oscar nominee in the lead role of Freddy Krueger, and Jackie Earle Haley is an amazing actor. Yeah, I can enjoy watching it for the parts I do like Jackie's performance and the darker tone. The later sequels to Nightmare on Elm Street, they really went overboard with Freddy's humor, but now they made him darker and scarier, which I did like. Unfortunately, they also bogged down the movie too much in cheap jump scares instead of genuine chills, which I think was a huge mistake. They wasted a lot of potential with that.
Yeah.
The script could have been a lot better. Yeah, and I don't hate it as much as other people do. I actually got into a pretty nasty argument with someone, all because I said I didn't think it was as bad as a lot of other people make it out to be. I swear, this guy treated me like I was the devil.
Yeah, that's weird.
I certainly don't think it's the worst of the series. For me, that dishonor goes to Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, which I hate with a passion.
And you see, I'll say this, I do think this movie is technically better than Freddy's Dead. It might even be technically better than Freddy vs. Jason. I would still rather watch both of those than this one, personally. Yeah, this one I'm not that crazy about. I do appreciate a lot of what it tried to do, but overall, like you said, it was just not executed well at all. As far as the dark tone of the movie, I did appreciate that, and that's actually a huge criticism I heard about this movie when it first came out back in 2010. A lot of people are like, oh, it's too dark, and I'm like, did you not see the original Nightmare on Elm Street? The original Nightmare on Elm Street's a pretty dark and genuinely creepy movie. Yeah, the original has moments of camp, but I would say for the most part it's a pretty dead serious movie, except maybe towards the end when Nancy has the booby trap set up in the house, but it's still, regardless, the original is also I think just a genuinely better written film and a better made film too. But that is something I like, is that this does try to return the franchise to its darker, creepier roots. At the same time, for as dark as Jackie Earle Haley's Freddy tries to be, he actually makes more jokes in this one than he does in the original film. He barely made any jokes in the original film. In this, he does, they're dark, but he's still making, little subtle wisecracks in this one.
Yeah, but they're not nearly as bad as the ones in parts 4, 5, and 6.
Maybe not. Although I think that would have been amazing to have this version of Freddy saying, "Hey, you forgot the power glove!"
No, but I mean, he's, the wisecracks he makes in this, first of all, I don't think he really starts to make the familiar wisecracks until, like, the very end. And second of all, they're dark wisecracks. The type of humor someone would have while torturing someone.
The plot of the movie is more or less the same plot as the original, but definitely changed. Essentially, the film follows a group of high school students who are all having the same dreams. They're all having dreams about this boogeyman-like figure with what appear to be knives for fingernails on his right hand and a horribly burnt face, and eventually the characters find out that they all went to the same preschool together, but they don't remember that, and it turns out there was this man at the preschool named Freddy Krueger who may or may not have molested them, and this guy just disappeared, but eventually one of them finds out that, oh no, their parents hunted this guy down and killed him, and now his ghost is haunting them in their dreams. That's the basic plot line. It more or less is the same plot as the original, but in this they made Freddy just a child molester instead of a child murderer, which is not a change I necessarily minded per se, although it does kind of make the glove irrelevant. I mean, they do kind of explain in the movie that the glove was something he used to, like, scratch one of the kids, I guess implying they'd got some weird sexual pleasure from that, which actually is kind of a creepy fucking idea onto itself.
It should be noted that making Freddy a child molester was Wes Craven's original idea, and the reason he changed it was because there was the
McMartin trials? Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Real-life incidents. He and the studio didn't want people to think that they were cashing in on that.
In the movie, there's sort of a red herring where you think that maybe Freddy might have been innocent and maybe these people accidentally killed an innocent man. And you know what? I actually think that would have been a really interesting angle to go with. Like, what if this guy was unjustly murdered and is somewhat justified in his revenge? Like, I actually really would have liked that. But of course they don't go with that.
Oh yeah, they squandered that opportunity.
Yeah.
And I remember being so disappointed in that when I saw the movie. I thought, wow, that's actually a great new angle. Make Freddy somewhat justified, and they totally ruined it.
Yeah.
I also want to go back to my original point of this movie getting bogged down in cheap jump scares. So many scenes would have been so much better if they'd given them time to breathe and, didn't just rush quickly with a jump scare.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. I like certain things about it, but overall it's just, I don't think the movie worked overall, personally. But yeah, Jackie Earle Haley is pretty good as Freddy Krueger, if we're being honest.
Oh yeah, the voice he does for him is great, You really shouldn't fall asleep in class.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about, though, with, like, the wise-ass comments, I will say this, I actually thought when Jesse dies, and then, like, you see him in the dream, and then Freddy says that the brain still operates for however many minutes after the body is dead, which means we still have 7 minutes to play. That was actually creepy.
Yes. I also want to mention, like I said, I loved the darker tone this movie had. Even from the opening credits, you can tell this is going to be a very dark film.
Yeah.
The opening...
at its heart, it's a film about child abuse and child molestation, which is a very dark and fucked up subject.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does have that going for it. But one thing about that, though, is like, okay, so all these kids block that out of their memory. Like, to be fair, that does happen where a traumatic thing happens to a child and they block it out of their memory. But for all of them to do that, that is a huge suspension of disbelief. I guess the way you could justify it is maybe because supernatural forces are at work in this movie. Maybe it's Freddy from beyond the grave caused them to forget all that. Maybe.
Well, possible that after the parents found out what happened, maybe they put their kids through some intensive psychiatric program
That's a good point. I think they do somewhat imply hypnosis at one point, so maybe that's it. So
I also want to bring up the fact that why weren't these parents more concerned about a grown man living in the preschool and playing with their kids sooner?
Yeah, that is a good point.
I'd raise an eyebrow at that.
Yeah. That is a really good point. I will say this. The flashback scene where you see them hunting down Freddy, that's actually a good scene for the most part. Like, you hear the fear in his voice, and you almost start to empathize with him a little bit, even though this guy is a complete piece of shit, knowing what we know about him at the end of the film. At the same time, it's like you almost find yourself feeling somewhat sorry for him when they're hunted him down.
But then, of course, they ruin the scene by ending it with Freddy running towards the camera as he's burning on fire, and it looks really fucking stupid.
I didn't mind that so much. I will say that I was very excited for this movie in the time leading up to its release, from the very first announcement that they were making it, because, I never saw any of the other Elm Street movies in the theater. I had to see them, on DVD. I was very excited when the first trailer was finally released. It took forever. I immediately raced downstairs in the morning to my computer to watch it, and I watched it over and over again. And it looked very promising.
And you see, at the time, I was so against this because that was the time when we were just being inundated with horror remakes, and at that age, I was like so anti-remake. I was like, no, I don't want a remake of Nightmare on Elm Street. I want another sequel. I was kind of like in that mindset. But I guess if a remake had to happen, it still could have been better than this, in my opinion.
I will say this movie did go through some reshoots, which may or may not have affected the final product. The opening scene in the diner, it wasn't originally supposed to be at a diner. It was supposed to take place at a pool party. And for whatever reason, they decided to change that. It's like, they show Nancy as a waitress at the diner, and it's like, okay, there's never any reference to her being a waitress at all and throughout the later movies, so what was the point of that?
Yeah.
There was also some deleted scenes that could have been interesting to see. There was one scene they shot where I think Jesse sees Freddy murdering his father in a dream, in his dream. There was one where the character Chris finds Freddy in a candle-lit lair. But yeah, I'm just saying there might have been some good material that got left on the cutting room floor. Do you know the website, the Nightmare on Elm Street Companion?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Well, it had, I think, some other drafts of the script available to read, and I remember reading one, and I thought it might have been good, better than what we got, but without seeing it actually put to film, we'll never know, I suppose.
Yeah, now we probably should talk about the rest of the cast besides Jackie Earle Haley. You have Rooney Mara, I was blanking on her name for a second, Rooney Mara as Nancy. Now, I like Rooney Mara. I think she's a very good actress, but she's not very good in this movie at all.
She's pretty bland. Yeah, she said she, didn't really want to do this movie, and she sort of self-sabotaged her own audition, and then when she got the part, she was like, oh, fuck, I just got that. And it's like, well, whether the movie was good or not in this case is irrelevant. It's like, it was still a big-budget, major Hollywood motion picture, and Nancy is one of the leading roles in it, so it was still a stepping stone possibly to better things. Yeah. So for you to shit all over it and say you didn't even want it in the first place, it makes her sound so ungrateful.
Yeah, it's something you said when me and Bill did the retrospective all those years ago. You pointed out how there are so many other actresses who would kill for that opportunity.
Oh yeah, so many other struggling young actresses would have killed for that role, I'm sure. And she actually said that making this movie made her want to quit acting.
Jesus. Who knows? Maybe she really did have a terrible time working on it.
Yeah, I remember reading somewhere, I don't know how true this is, that she didn't get along well with director Samuel Bayer. Samuel Bayer, for his part, he only did the movie because producer Michael Bay told him, this will open the door for you to finally break into motion pictures instead of just music videos. And to date, he hasn't directed another movie. I don't think he really cared about the material. He took the job because he wanted to break into feature films, and I think that was it.
Yeah.
He had no passion for the material or the character of Freddy. He took the job because it seemed like a good idea at the time. It seemed like a good job to take.
You also have Connie Britton as Nancy's mother in the movie. I don't believe she's called Marge in this movie. I forgot what her character's name. Gwen, okay. And yeah, she's alright in the movie. Yeah. You also have the great Clancy Brown as Quentin's father. And, I mean, come on. Clancy Brown in a fucking Nightmare on Elm Street movie? That should be amazing. But unfortunately, they don't use him that much in the movie, which is a shame.
Well, I mean, he's present somewhat throughout.
Yeah, I mean, he's an important character, technically. He is one of the people who killed Freddy, but, I mean, it's still... I don't know, I sometimes forget he's even in this movie, but I also find... That's another issue I have with this movie, is I find most of the film to be very forgettable.
You also have Kyle Gallner as Quentin.
And I like him, I actually really do. What's funny about him is he actually acted with Robert Englund in the Jack Ketchum adaptation Red. Like, he was in that one, and when I met Robert Englund, I asked him to sign my copy of that movie, and there's a picture of Kyle, how do you say the last? Gallner on the back of the DVD, and Robert Englund pointed him out saying, I love this kid. Point out what a great actor he is, and I agree, I actually think he's a very underrated actor.
Yeah, and he's had a pretty good career, too. You know, he was just recently in Smile and Scream 5, and he also, I think, had a role in Clint Eastwood's American Sniper.
Yeah, now, what do you think of the Jesse character, who's basically the stand-in for Rod?
I don't think there's anything wrong with the actor's performance, but the character, the way he's written, is such a jerk.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, though, I mean, he is the victim of child molestation, so it's like, maybe that has something to do with it, but of course, the movie doesn't explore those ideas at all, though, about how being molested as a child could affect you as a teenager or a young adult, so...
You never know. Maybe some of that cut footage might have done that, but we'll never know. But, I mean, you know, at the funeral scene for Dean's funeral, when, you know, Chris is tearing up and saying that she witnessed Dean's suicide, and that Dean was saying something about a man in his dreams, and Nancy tries to comfort her. Jesse basically just tells her to fuck off, and I'm like, well, that was uncalled for.
Yeah, no, he's a douchebag, he really is. And, okay, Rod was kind of a douchebag in the original film, yet Rod felt more genuine, more believable, and more sympathetic than this character did. And then you had the character of Chris, who's basically the Tina stand-in. Do you remember the actress who played...
Katie Cassidy.
Yeah, what do you think of her?
I thought she was alright. She kind of starts off the movie. We follow her first, for the most part.
Which is kind of how it was with Tina in the original.
Although, I would say that Chris lasts a lot longer than Tina did.
Yeah. But I'm also going to say this. They recreate the Tina death scene in this, and it's nowhere near as effective.
No, the original Tina death scene was slow and very agonizing. Here, it's just wham, 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 wham. I actually paid a consignment service to get her autograph on my 8x12 Nightmare on Elm Street poster, and I also got Kellan Lutz's autograph on there when I met him a few years ago. I'm hoping they add more to it someday. Yeah, what did you think of Kellan Lutz and his brief time in the movie?
Yeah, he was alright.
Yeah, you know, he actually, I read, stayed up for several days to get into character. Even though I would have liked to have seen the original pool party scene, the diner scene is actually pretty creepy.
Okay.
You know, you kind of see him trying to find the waitress for his coffee, and he's wandering around, and you see all these dead animals, you know, burning on fire on the, you know, stove, and all this disturbing imagery. Yeah, it's pretty scary, I would say.
Now, before we continue on with our discussion, I want to cut to my friend John giving his thoughts on the 2010 Nightmare on Elm Street remake.
Hello everyone, 5 years ago on Christian's channel, we did all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies on his podcast. I mentioned that I skipped this one, was not really interested in watching it for that retrospective podcast. But at that time, I had my reasons. Here we are a few years later, I finally saw the remake to A Nightmare on Elm Street back in 2019. Well, but it's been a while since I saw the remake. Here's my honest opinion from when I remember seeing the remake 3 years ago. Well, I didn't hate or love the remake. Not the same way I hated the Friday the 13th, had mixed feelings on the Halloween remake, and the Black Christmas remake, which I really hated, and other horror movie remakes. Those films did not do justice for me and missed the whole point and concept, what the original represented, how scary they were. To me, this movie was hit or miss. As I said in the podcast a few years ago, here I go again for the record. I was a junior in high school when this movie came out. At that time, I was deep into my horror phase. What's also ironic is that Halloween 2009, I had just seen the original Nightmare on Elm Street that time, really loved it, was really scared and horrified from it. Then a few months later, the remake came out. Haven't seen all the Michael Myers, Jason, and other horror franchise movies and the remakes. I was burnt out with crappy remakes, and I skipped this one thinking, nah, this was gonna suck. As I said before, I didn't hate or love it. It had its moments that were okay and other moments that ruined it. It took away the whole point of the original. I don't think Jackie Earle Haley was not a bad Freddy Krueger. He tried too hard, was under a lot of pressure and stress trying to make Freddy his own. He had big shoes to fill to replace Robert Englund, a big horror icon legend. Because the year before, around that time, he was big as Rorschach in The Watchmen. I thought, okay, maybe he'd be a good Freddy. As Freddy, he struck out. His makeup as Freddy looked like a fish. Rooney Mara sucked as Nancy. She was so bland. You can tell Rooney Mara did not give two shits about the character or the movie. She only did this movie to jumpstart her career, was only doing it for the paycheck. Thankfully, she's had a successful career after this. But again, no effort in this character, no personality or emotions like Heather Langenkamp's character, Nancy, in the original. It's ironic how this movie came out the same year as The Social Network, but a few months apart. I liked her movies like Line and A Ghost Story. Kyle Gallner, who plays the boyfriend of Nancy, is a good actor, but I don't remember anything about his performance in this movie that comes to mind. The opening scene diner was okay, but after that it goes downhill, it gets a little disappointing from that point and then on. When they recreated some of the most famous icon scenes from the original, it just didn't really do much for me. It was kind of stale and lazy. Like, for instance, Nancy was sleeping and Freddy came through the walls. It was CGI, not done well like the original. Or Nancy falling asleep in the bathtub, Freddy's claw pops up. Again, not iconic or scary as the original. While this movie may not be a masterpiece or great, of course, does not top the original, this movie, isn't that bad. It's average. For me, it was a one-time watch for me. Never had any interest or desire to go back and rewatch it over and over again. Whenever I watch A Nightmare on Elm Street, the original is the one I go back to. Because how scary it was, the concept, being killed in your sleep, was very horrifying, scary when it came out back in the 80s. To wrap things up, we haven't had a Freddy movie since 2010. Sometimes I wonder, does that mean this franchise is dead? Or will they do the same thing what they did with the new Halloween movies? Skip the sequels and restart a new series? Bring back Heather Langenkamp and Robert Englund back. As cool that would be, but who knows it'll ever happen, though. Especially how, Robert Englund is, retired as Freddy. So that was my review of the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. Thank you, Christian, for having me part of this review. Hope you liked it, enjoyed it, and see you next time.
I was disappointed when I first saw it, but there are still some things that I like about it. And I don't think it always deserves the bashing it gets. Maybe for some things it does, but I don't think it's as bad as Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. And as far as horror remakes are concerned, I would say this one is not the worst. Oh no, trust me, there are far, far worse than this.
Fair enough.
It's not easy to be so excited for something only for it to not live up to expectations.
Okay.
It's not easy at all, but, I've come to accept that it wasn't all it could have been.
I think if you had people working on it who actually gave a shit about the material and actually respected the original, probably could have turned out better, I think.
Well, I think Jackie certainly respected it, and he tried his best.
Oh yeah, no, he's one of the better things about this movie. Even, like, I asked Robert Englund when I met him, what do you think of Jackie Earle Haley? And he said he loves Jackie. He thought he was a great choice for Freddy, although I think he said that he wasn't too crazy about this movie in and of itself, but he said he thought Jackie was the best part of it.
He certainly does give it his all. You know, a lot of people did not like this makeup at all, but it's based on actual burn victims. They were going for a more realistic kind of look. And Bart Mixon, the makeup creator, has stressed that, we based it all on real burn victims. And, you know, I've written to him, and he said Jackie Earle Haley was wonderful to work with. And, you know, the makeup took several hours, but he was very patient.
Yeah, I just find I think the biggest problem is, to me, it's just bland and forgettable. And that's just my opinion. Anybody who does like this movie, I'm not saying you're wrong, or I think it could have been a better movie, but I also admit I'm somewhat biased because the original Nightmare on Elm Street's one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. Nightmare on Elm Street as a franchise is probably my favorite horror franchise. And I think at the time this came out, I just wasn't that accepting of a remake. I wanted to see another sequel. I think I was just a purist back then, and I'm still kind of a purist now when it comes to that.
Fair enough. I mean, you know, Jackie is no Robert Englund, but he gives it his all. I love the voice he does. Laugh. You know, like that.
Why are you crying? I haven't even cut you yet.
Yeah, I mean, he's great. It's a shame we didn't get a sequel with him again as Freddy.
Yeah, they were going to do a sequel, weren't they? Because this actually did well, I think, right?
Financially it did well, but it was so poorly received critically that I guess they decided against it.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad we never got one at the same time. It would have been interesting to see what angle they go with a sequel. Would it be a direct remake of one of the sequels to the original, or would it be like just something new entirely? So, and that's actually something I did want to talk to you about in this video, is the potential future of the Nightmare on Elm Street series, because like obviously the influence of Nightmare on Elm Street you could still see in so many other horror films. Like you mentioned Smile before. I definitely saw somewhat of a Nightmare on Elm Street influence on that. I don't know if you ever saw It Follows, but It Follows definitely had a real Nightmare on Elm Street vibe, and the most recent season of Stranger Things, that whole season felt like the best Nightmare on Elm Street sequel we never got. So the influence is still there, and it's clear the fan base for Nightmare on Elm Street is still very much strong. I know Robert Englund has said he's too old to play Freddy at this point, although I heard that Heather Langenkamp has expressed interest in playing Nancy again if they ever decided to do a sequel that like ignores all the other ones, like a legacy sequel, which I would be cool with. Unfortunately, if that happens, we probably won't get Robert Englund to come back as Freddy.
I mean, let's see. The man is now 75 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, he's 5 years away from 80. I mean, he doesn't want to be enduring all those makeup sessions anymore.
And I don't blame him either, you know, like, and honestly, like, as I would love to see, like, them do, like, something like what they did with Halloween 2018. I would love to see sort of a direct sequel to the original, even though the nerd in me would love to see a Freddy vs. Jason 2. I know that's never gonna happen, so, yeah, if that ever happens, like that legacy sequel that Heather Langenkamp expressed interest in, I would be all for that. But in terms of like other people who could play Freddy, I know didn't Kevin Bacon express interest in playing Freddy? That would be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Although one actor who I actually do think would make a really interesting Freddy is Richard Brake.
Yeah, he'd be good.
Yeah. But who knows what the future holds for this franchise?
Well, I think some of the rights reverted back to Wes Craven's estate, which is great. So who knows? But, you know, I'd love to see them try again.
Yeah.
Even if it's just another remake.
Now, before we continue on, I want to cut to our friend Bill Burns. This audio was taken from the 2018 retrospective on the Nightmare on Elm Street series, so here are his brief thoughts on the Nightmare on Elm Street remake.
Well, I thought, to be honest, I thought it was kind of mediocre. I think there were some things that they did well, and there were other things that I was disappointed in, you know? I just think that, again, it's like, here's this, they're doing this sort of reboot, or whatever you want to call it, that the sky's the limit. I mean, they could do so much, especially with dreams. If you think about it, there's so much you could do with that. And I just thought they were very conservative in terms of what they did with the film. I agree, there are some scenes that I thought were done really well, but overall, I just got the feeling of just being underwhelmed by the film, I think. It's not that I hated the film, but it didn't meet my expectations or my hopes for what I thought they could do with this.
And here is author Mark Allen Gunnels giving his thoughts on the Nightmare remake. Now, this is also audio taken from the 2018 Nightmare on Elm Street retrospective.
Now, I don't hate the remake. I like it better than the remakes of Friday the 13th and Halloween. I think they had some good ideas, they were taking it in a few different directions. I did think, when they tried to recreate set pieces from the original is where they failed, just because, CGI to me has its place, but the CGI of Freddy coming out of the wall behind Nancy in the original, when it was just a man pushing out at a rubber piece that had been set behind the bed, that actually looked more effective and creepier. The actress who played Nancy in the remake, I know she went on to be very well thought of. I thought it was a horrible performance with no personality, just completely flat. I was a little disappointed. They seem to be toying with this idea of making Freddy a victim in the sense that he was wrongly accused when he was originally killed. That to me would have had wonderfully interesting ramifications, but that turned out just to be a tease, which is a little bit of a spoiler, I'm sorry, but so it actually ultimately didn't go anywhere. I did not think it recaptured the energy or the electricity or the magic of the film it was a remake of. So again, I didn't hate the remake, but it did pale in comparison, and the Freddy in the remake didn't do as much for me. He didn't seem to have as much. I felt like they wanted him to have even more menace than Robert Englund had in the original film, but I didn't feel that.
Again, I don't think this one is terrible. I think it's very flawed, and I think it wasted a lot of potential, but I still think there is some redeeming value in it. When I sent a letter to producer Brad Fuller, and he sent back a poster signed by both himself and his co-producer Andrew Form, so that was nice of them. I remember I wrote to Jackie Earle Haley before the film was released, and he signed a few of my pictures, which was nice.
I'll also say this about the movie. It has some really cool ideas, like the whole micro-naps thing. Like, okay, that's what they do with that's actually pretty interesting. So if I have anything positive to say about the movie, it does have some really good ideas.
It does. It really does. And the idea that Freddy could have been innocent was also something that could have been done very well, but unfortunately it wasn't. There is one alternate ending that they actually did release on the Blu-ray, which I think would have been much better than what they did in the finished film. Freddy, in the dream, changes his face to when he was still human. He says, "I can make it just like it was." Changes his face. It's on YouTube if you're interested in seeing it. Nancy pulls him out. He still has his human face. And she beats him and says, "Look at me. Look at what you did to me." And then I believe she sets him on fire. Oh, no, wait. No, first he says, "You'll always be my little Nancy." And she says, "I'm all grown up now," and then sets him on fire. That was actually a pretty powerful ending. It's a shame they didn't use it. I also like how when Nancy and Quentin are doing research in the bookstore, Quentin kind of compares Freddy to the Pied Piper.
Okay, yeah.
That was
interesting, yeah.
Yeah, that was very interesting. And I wish they'd expanded upon it, but unfortunately they didn't. That's another wasted potential. I mean, it's far from perfect. They screwed a lot of things up, but like I said, there is some redeeming value to it. So if you haven't watched it already, I'd say at least give it one watch. Maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't like it, but at least give it a chance.
Yeah, like, I'm not a fan, but if you like it, that's cool. And if you are a fan of the franchise, at least watch this one once. Like you said, to give it a chance. And if you're a completionist, just to say that you've seen all the films in the franchise, I guess.
Now we would like to cut to our late friend Chris Maino giving his thoughts on the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. This recording comes from a retrospective video we did on the Nightmare on Elm Street series back in 2018. Chris was one of the smartest individuals I've ever known. He was able to go into such depth on whatever we talked about and was always such a joy to listen to. Even if he didn't like a movie, he was always respectful and wouldn't talk down to anyone for liking something he didn't. He was just an all-around great guy, and we all miss him. Rest in peace, Chris.
So this one is the opposite of what I said about the Friday remake, which I loved. This one is just bland as hell. I do like that they try to experiment with it, with the dream wake stuff, like the idea that they're so sleep deprived that they're now kind of like just falling into REM sleep as they're awake. They're having like these weird ass visions, and Freddy's just like coming after them through that. Like I think it's like in a supermarket or something when he just like appears down the aisle and stuff. That's a cool scene. And admittedly, the opening scene is pretty fucked up when like Kellan Lutz just like slits his own throat. It's pretty crazy. But beyond that, the plot just wasn't there. Jackie did a good job as Freddy, but it doesn't add up to Robert's Freddy. And something else that I mentioned to Christian beforehand was I think Rooney was kind of miscast as Nancy, and I think the one who plays Chris, Katie Cassidy, she would have been way better as Nancy. I thought she had like a better presence, and it is shocking when she dies like halfway through because up until that point you followed her. And Nancy, when she becomes the final girl, you're almost kind of like, who the fuck cares? So yeah, it's got like that Jeanette Lee effect almost, where you're like, holy shit, they just killed off somebody we actually really care about. But for all its like winnings, there's like an equal fault. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the remake.
But yeah, if there's nothing else you want to say, I guess that concludes our review of the 2010 Nightmare on Elm Street remake. And my next review for Horror Month, I know we're well into November, I'm still doing Horror Month. My next and final review for Horror Month will actually be on the recent reboot of the Hellraiser franchise.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what comments we get on this video. Are people going to be saying, oh, what are you kidding? It's a piece of trash. How can you defend this movie? I hope not. But, I'm interested to see what people have to say about our views on this movie.